What if I told you that the well-known Bible may be missing important details like God's laws, the patriarchs, and creation? The Ethiopian Orthodox Bible's Book of Jubilees claims to close these gaps by providing a more in-depth understanding of God's purpose. Yet why did the Church keep this book hidden from the world for centuries? This explosive biblical text, often known as the Lesser Genesis, is filled with secrets and prohibited information that religious leaders did not want the public to know. However, what could be concealed within its pages? Why does this book still spark debates centuries later? We are delving into the Book of Jubilees in order to discover the secrets it contains. The Book of Jubilees does more than simply recount the events of Genesis. It also presents a divine, angel-supervised 364-day solar calendar designed to bring humanity into harmony with God's desire. The creation myth in Genesis begins with Earth, but the Book of Jubilees adds that God created angels to rule the universe on the first day. These angels ensure that the sun, moon, and stars follow divine courses by regulating time, seasons, and other natural events. Jubilees, in contrast to other writings, emphasizes how these angelic beings maintain cosmic order and bring all of creation into harmony with God's desire. According to Jubilees 29, angels govern not only people, but also time. Humans create chaos when they deviate from God's appointed time. One of the book's most controversial ideas is its claim that a 364-day solar calendar is the only reliable method of measuring time, and that it is perfectly in line with God's plan. So, each season in this calendar lasts exactly 13 weeks, making sure holy days always fall on the right day. This is in contrast to the lunar calendar used by the Israelites and others, which Jubilees criticize as being all over the place, chaotic and, well, a little corrupt. It's interesting to note that this solar calendar is similar to that of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which may be among the only organizations that still observe this holy time. But what's the big deal about sticking to the lunar calendar? Well, Jubilees 637 emphasizes that it's not just a mistake, but rather a disobedience to God's plan. In Jubilees, the Sabbath is emphasized as a cosmic commandment given to both humans and angels, rather than just as a day of rest, building on Genesis. By connecting weekly cycles to 49-year Jubilee cycles, this holy day acts as the cornerstone of time, bringing balance and rejuvenation to all of creation, even the heavenly realm. Jubilees 21 emphasizes the holy cycles of time and presents the Sabbath as an eternal ordinance, giving the Genesis narrative more meaning. According to the Torah, God gave Adam particular instructions from the beginning, such as keeping the Sabbath, regulations pertaining to purity, and guidelines for marriage and worship. Unlike Genesis, Jubilees presents angels as mediators, especially the angels of the presence, who assist Adam and Eve in adhering to these laws. They strengthen Adam's position within God's promise with humanity by ensuring that he understands sanctity, sacrifice, and moral behavior. In Jubilees 31-2, angels tell Adam that God's laws form part of a celestial order, which both humans and angels must follow as an eternal covenant. This begs the question, did humanity receive these heavenly commandments long before Moses? Jubilees sheds light on the tale of Cain and Abel after Adam and Eve fall, portraying Cain's killing of Abel as a serious transgression with spiritual repercussions. But thanks to Seth, Adam's good son, who obeys God's commands, humanity still has hope. The Book of Jubilees reveals both Noah's survival and the covenant God establishes with him, which emphasizes chastity, holiness, and obedience to divine rule. Is it any surprise that the flood became necessary when the Nephilim, offspring of fallen angels and humans, had corrupted themselves and descended into lawlessness and chaos? God established a new covenant with Noah once the waters subsided, and it included several important guidelines, such as keeping the Sabbath, offering sacrifices, and following purity restrictions. These weren't just random rules. They were intended to maintain honesty and stop corruption from retaking power. These same rules were later passed to the Israelites in order to preserve the faith. Abraham's early years are also examined in Jubilees, which reveals how he was brought up in an idolatrous home where his father, Terah, worshipped false gods. Abraham chose to follow the one true God and rejected idolatry in contrast to his family. Abraham is portrayed in Jubilees 11:16-17 as a rebel who destroyed the idols in his father's home in protest of his idolatry. He makes a daring move by rejecting pagan traditions, which puts him on the way to becoming the father of the chosen people. Long before Moses, angels conveyed the laws from Adam to Abraham as part of the covenant established between Abraham and God. Angels explained the heavenly tablets that contained God's commands to Abraham. Jubilees portrays Abraham as part of a cosmic plan, while Genesis shows his deeds as a reflection of his personal faith. Jubilees adds an intriguing twist to the covenant of circumcision, which is initially addressed in Genesis 17. It is a divine law that has been inscribed on the celestial tablets since the beginning of time. This is an unbreakable law that applies to all generations. The binding of Isaac is presented in Jubilees 18:10 as a cosmic conflict between good and evil, in which the angel Master attempts to steer Abraham toward defeat. God's intervention shows that faithfulness wins over wickedness. God tells Rebekah in Genesis 25:23 that her sons, Jacob and Esau, will rule two nations, with the elder serving the younger. Jubilees further explains that Jacob was meant to receive the blessing and carry on the line of righteousness, while Esau's successors will turn against Israel. Esau's offspring revolt against Jacob's line, making him a rebellious figure. Jubilees depicts Esau's rebellion as both personal and national, with his descendants, the Edomites, becoming Israel's long-lasting enemies. After Jacob receives the blessing in Genesis, Jubilees adds to the story by showing that Jacob not only inherits the birthright, but also receives the divine guidelines that Abraham gave him. Jacob is the guardian of God's everlasting commandments because of these regulations, which include the Sabbath, cleanliness, and sacred calendar. This divine function identifies him as the keeper of God's law and connects him to the heavenly tablets. It depicts the rivalry between Jacob and Esau as a component of a greater cosmic conflict between Israel and Edom. Throughout biblical history, this bitter rivalry never really went away, and it even shows up in the apocalyptic vision. Isn't it fascinating how this age-old conflict echoes in the apocalyptic vision and still influences history? According to Jubilees, the birth of Jacob's 12 sons was a part of a heavenly design rather than merely the product of human ties. Each son's birth was in harmony with the sacred calendar, as decreed by God, with their fates recorded on the heavenly tablets. In Jubilees, Reuben's sin is viewed as a spiritual failing that disqualifies him from leadership, paving the way for Judah to emerge as the tribal leader and Levi to assume the priesthood. Jubilees presents Levi's priesthood as a key part of God's everlasting plan, established in the heavenly tablets long before Moses formalized it. God chooses Levi to be the spiritual leader, entrusting him with the responsibility of ensuring his commands are followed and bridging the divide between heaven and earth. The book portrays Levi's priesthood as an essential component of God's divine plan from the beginning, not just a response to historical events. The betrayal of Joseph by his brothers is depicted in Jubilees as a global sin that violates God's sacred order. It emphasizes that the brothers' activities upset God's plan and would result in divine punishment unless they repent, in contrast to Genesis, which focuses mostly on the brothers' envy. The heavenly tablets record their wrongdoing, and their generations suffer until they turn from their sin. In Jubilees, Joseph's rise to power in Egypt serves as part of God's divine plan, recorded on the heavenly tablets. He succeeds not just because of his abilities, but because God preordained him as Israel's rescuer. Joseph's leadership was destined to pave the way for the Exodus, saving the Israelites from famine, but eventually leading to their enslavement in Egypt before their release. The part that angels played in Joseph's life is an interesting addition to Jubilees. It emphasizes that God sent angels to lead and guard Joseph. In contrast, Genesis focuses on Joseph's relationship with God through dreams. Because God valued Joseph's life and his path was recorded in the heavenly tablets, the angels intervened at key moments to protect him from harm. Joseph's biography assumes a prophetic role in Jubilees, connecting his ascent to power in Egypt to the Israelites' eventual enslavement and redemption. According to the heavenly tablets, Joseph promised his brothers that God would save them despite his knowledge of the impending bondage. As part of God's divine promise to guide people into freedom and the Mosaic law, his death marks the start of Israel's slavery. Jubilees portrays Israel's period in Egypt as a significant chapter in a much larger spiritual narrative, not just a historical trip. Their hardships and final deliverance are all part of God's larger plan, in which his glory will be revealed. Angels and evil entities like Masta work behind Pharaoh to thwart God's plan, and Israel's oppression is seen as a spiritual conflict. In addition to being symbolic acts of divine punishment, the 10 plagues demonstrate that only Israel's God is truly powerful by vanquishing Egypt's gods. The laws given to Moses were part of an eternal divine order, written before creation, and the Exodus is tied to a cosmic timeline recorded in the heavenly tablets. Jubilees also implies that the Mosaic law was a restoration of the ancient divine order because the patriarchs, including Abraham, adhered to these commandments long before Moses did. The Mosaic law is presented in Jubilees as an everlasting divine code that is given to all righteous people, not only those who are Israeli. The book focuses on a cosmic calendar in which God's universal order is reflected in the Sabbath, festivals, and Jubilee years. It is essential to follow this solar calendar in order to remain in accordance with God's will. Angels, who keep the Sabbath and celebrate God's festivals in heaven, are thought to be bound by the laws that are written on the tablets of heaven just like humans. Jubilees emphasizes how events such as Israel's suffering, exile, and eventual return are predetermined and part of a divinely ordered chronology. Angels are essential in carrying out God's wrath, especially at the end times, since they vanquish evil spirits and separate the virtuous from the wicked. This cosmic plan foretells the end of the current era and the establishment of God's everlasting reign through the restoration of Israel and the arrival of the Messianic kingdom. Isn't it amazing how the events of Israel, its suffering, exile, and eventual return, are not just coincidental, but rather parts of a grand cosmic plan that was foretold long ago?